The cafeteria was packed that Tuesday afternoon, filled with the usual chaos of lunch period. Hundreds of students crowded around tables, their voices creating a wall of noise that bounced off the walls. In the far corner near the windows, a freshman sat alone at a table meant for 8. His name was David, and he always sat in the same spot, always ate the same lunch his mom packed, and always kept his eyes down on his food. David had autism. Most kids in school knew this, though not everyone understood what it meant. What they did notice was that he was different. He didn't make eye contact when people talked to him. He covered his ears when the cafeteria got too loud. Sometimes he rocked back and forth in his seat, humming quietly to himself, and he never ever sat with anyone else. On this particular day, 3 junior boys had decided David would be their entertainment. They approached his table with the kind of swagger that comes from knowing nobody would stop them. The leader of the group was Tyler, a lacrosse player who thought being cruel was the same thing as being funny. "Hey, look who's sitting all alone again," Tyler announced loudly, making sure nearby tables could hear. His friends laughed on cue like they'd rehearsed it. David kept his eyes on his sandwich, his hands starting to shake slightly. He recognized the voice. These weren't the first mean words he'd heard, and his body was already preparing for what might come next. "What's wrong? Too weird to have friends?" Another boy chimed in. They moved closer to David's table, forming a semicircle that blocked his view of the rest of the cafeteria. For David, this was more than just intimidating. It was overwhelming. The voices, the closeness, the unpredictability of what they might do next. His breathing got faster. Tyler reached out and knocked David's lunch tray, sending it sliding across the table. The chocolate milk carton tipped over, spilling brown liquid across David's carefully organized food. His sandwich, cut into perfect squares the way he needed it to be, was now soaked. David's hands flew to his ears and he started rocking more noticeably. A sound escaped his throat, something between a whimper and a hum. "Oh wow, look at that. The freak is freaking out," Tyler laughed, and his friends joined in. A few students at nearby tables had noticed but quickly looked away. Nobody wanted to get involved. Nobody wanted to become the next target. That's when Jake Morrison walked past. He was a senior, a starting linebacker on the football team, someone who usually ate lunch with his teammates on the other side of the cafeteria. He'd been heading to throw something away when he heard the commotion. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. Jake had never really noticed David before. In a school of over 2,000 students, it was easy to be invisible. But watching this kid sitting there, clearly in distress while 3 guys stood over him laughing, that was something Jake couldn't ignore. "Hey," Jake called out, his voice cutting through the noise. Tyler and his friends turned around, their smiles fading when they saw who was talking. "What's going on here?" Tyler tried to play it cool. "Nothing, man. Just messing around." "Doesn't look like nothing," Jake said, walking closer. He was bigger than all 3 of them, and they knew it. "Looks like you're bothering someone who's trying to eat lunch." "Come on, Jake, we were just joking around. This kid doesn't even know what's happening." Tyler attempted a laugh, but it sounded hollow now. Jake looked at David, who was still covering his ears, his eyes squeezed shut. "He knows exactly what's happening. Now get out of here before I make this a real problem for you." The 3 boys exchanged glances. Tyler started to say something, then thought better of it. They walked away, throwing looks over their shoulders but not daring to say anything else. The students who had been watching quickly went back to their own conversations, the moment of drama over. Jake stood there for a second, unsure what to do next. David still had his hands over his ears, still rocking slightly. Jake had no experience with autism, no training in how to help someone who was overwhelmed. He just knew he couldn't walk away. He slowly sat down across from David, careful not to make any sudden movements. He didn't say anything at first, just sat there quietly. After about a minute, David's rocking slowed down. His hands came away from his ears, though his eyes stayed closed. "Hey," Jake said softly. "They're gone. It's just me now. I'm Jake." David opened his eyes but didn't look at Jake directly. He stared at the spilled milk on his tray, at his ruined lunch. His voice when he spoke was quiet and precise. "My sandwich is wet. I can't eat wet bread. The texture is wrong." Jake looked at the destroyed lunch, then at his own tray. He had a burger and fries untouched. "You want my lunch? I haven't eaten any of it yet." For the first time, David glanced up, though his eyes focused somewhere around Jake's shoulder rather than his face. "You would give me your food?" "Yeah, of course. Those guys ruined yours. It's only fair." Jake pushed his tray across the table. I can just grab something else. David stared at the burger for a long moment as if trying to solve a complex puzzle. I don't usually eat burgers on Tuesday. Tuesdays are sandwich days. That's okay. You don't have to eat it if you don't want to, Jake said. He wasn't annoyed or confused by David's statement. He just accepted it. But David reached out and took the burger, holding it carefully with both hands. Thank you, he said. Then, unexpectedly, he added, those boys come every week, usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays, sometimes Mondays. The simple statement hit Jake harder than he expected. This wasn't a one-time thing. This kid had been dealing with bullies for who knows how long, and nobody had done anything about it. What's your name? Jake asked. David Chen, I'm a freshman. I'm 14 years old. I like trains and airplanes. I know all the Boeing models and most of the Airbus ones too. Jake smiled. There was something genuine about the way David talked. No filter, no pretending to be cool. That's pretty awesome. I don't know anything about planes. Really? David looked up again, this time his eyes meeting Jake's for just a split second before darting away. The Boeing 747 can carry up to 416 passengers depending on the configuration. It has 4 engines and— David! A teacher's voice called out. It was Mrs. Patterson, one of the special education aides. She hurried over, concern written all over her face. I heard there was an incident. Are you okay? David nodded, taking a bite of the burger. Jake helped me. The other boys left. Mrs. Patterson looked at Jake with surprise and gratitude. Thank you so much. David, do you want to come with me to the resource room? I want to finish lunch with Jake, David said simply. Jake found himself nodding. Yeah, it's cool. I'll hang out with him. Mrs. Patterson hesitated, then smiled. Okay. David, you know where to find me if you need me. She walked away, glancing back once with an expression that seemed almost hopeful. Jake and David sat together for the rest of lunch. David told him about airplanes, about how the wings create lift, about the difference between turbofan and turbojet engines. Jake didn't understand half of it, but he listened anyway. There was something calming about David's voice when he talked about things he loved. A steadiness that hadn't been there when the bullies were around. When the bell rang, David carefully stacked his trash on the tray. Will you sit with me again tomorrow? He asked. The question caught Jake off guard. He thought about his usual lunch table, his teammates, the way they'd probably give him grief for sitting with the special needs kid. Then he thought about Tyler and his friends, about how many other Davids were out there eating alone. Yeah, Jake said. I'll sit with you tomorrow. David's face broke into a smile, genuine and unguarded. Okay, tomorrow is Wednesday. I bring turkey sandwiches on Wednesdays. My mom cuts them into triangles. As they left the cafeteria, Jake didn't know that this simple decision would change both of their lives forever. He didn't know that his teammates would question him, that some of his friends would abandon him, or that his girlfriend would later tell him she didn't sign up to date someone who hung out with those kids, and he just knew that sitting with David felt right in a way that popularity never had. In the parking lot after school, a woman approached Jake as he headed to his car. She was in her 40s with kind eyes that were red from crying. Are you Jake? She asked. Yeah, that's me. I'm Lisa Chen, David's mother. Mrs. Patterson called me. She told me what you did today. Her voice cracked. David has never had a friend at school. Not once in all his years. What you did today, sitting with him, protecting him, you have no idea what that means. Jake felt uncomfortable with the intensity of her gratitude. It wasn't a big deal. Just lunch. To you, maybe it was just lunch. To David? She wiped her eyes. He hasn't stopped talking about you. He told me about the Boeing 747. He only talks about planes with people he trusts. Jake didn't know what to say to that. He just nodded. Thank you, Lisa said again. Thank you for seeing my son. As Jake drove home that afternoon, her words stuck with him. Thank you for seeing my son. As if David had been invisible before. As if one lunch could make someone visible. He thought about tomorrow, about Wednesday turkey sandwiches cut into triangles. He thought about David's smile and the way those bullies had walked away so easily, as if they'd just been waiting for someone to tell them to stop. Maybe that's all it took sometimes, someone willing to see what everyone else ignored, someone willing to sit down and stay. Jake showed up to the cafeteria the next day, not entirely sure what to expect. Part of him wondered if David would even remember their conversation, or if yesterday had been some kind of one-time thing. But when he walked through the double doors, he spotted David already sitting at their table by the windows, looking toward the entrance like he'd been waiting. The moment David saw Jake, his whole face lit up. He waved, a big enthusiastic gesture that made several students turn to look. Jake waved back and headed over, very aware of the stares from his usual lunch table across the room. His best friend Connor raised his hands in a "what are you doing" gesture, but Jake just shook his head and kept walking. "You came," David said as Jake sat down. There was genuine surprise in his voice, like he hadn't quite believed it would happen. "I said I would, didn't I?" Jake pulled out his lunch. "So Wednesday, turkey triangles?" David opened his lunchbox and carefully removed a sandwich cut into 4 perfect triangles. "My mom always cuts them this way. Rectangles are for Thursdays." He said it like it was the most logical thing in the world, and Jake found himself accepting it without question. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before David started talking about the model airplane he was building at home. It was a 747 naturally, and he described every tiny detail, how the decals had to be placed just right, how the landing gear needed to be attached at a specific angle. Jake listened, asking questions here and there, genuinely curious about the precision David put into everything. "Do you want to see pictures?" David asked, pulling out his phone with an eagerness that made him seem younger than 14. "Sure," Jake said, and spent the next 10 minutes looking at photos of a partially completed model plane. David's explanations were thorough, sometimes repetitive, but there was something pure about his excitement that Jake found himself enjoying. Across the cafeteria, Connor and 2 other football players were making their way over. Jake saw them coming and felt a knot form in his stomach. He knew what was coming. "Hey, Jake," Connor said, his tone careful. "We're all sitting over there. You coming?" "I'm good here," Jake replied, keeping his voice casual. Connor glanced at David, who had gone quiet and was now staring intensely at his sandwich. "Dude, can I talk to you for a second?" He gestured toward the hallway. Jake sighed but stood up. "I'll be right back," he told David. In the hallway, Connor got straight to the point. "What are you doing, man?" "Eating lunch. Same as you. You know what I mean. Why are you sitting with that kid?" "His name is David," Jake said, feeling his jaw tighten. "And I'm sitting with him because I want to. Look, I get that you helped him yesterday. That was cool. But you don't have to make it your thing, you know? People are starting to talk. Let them talk." Connor ran his hand through his hair, frustrated. "Jake, you're a senior. You're supposed to be having the time of your life. Instead, you're babysitting a special needs kid? Come on, he's not a baby. He's actually really smart. Smarter than us about a lot of stuff." "That's not the point," Connor said. "The point is you're tanking your reputation for someone who probably won't even remember you after this year." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, the kind that made his hands curl into fists. "You know what? If my reputation depends on not sitting with David, then maybe my reputation isn't worth much." He turned to go back to the cafeteria. "Jake, come on. Don't be like this," Connor called after him, but Jake was already walking away. When he got back to the table, David looked up anxiously. "Are you in trouble because of me?" "No," Jake said firmly, sitting back down. "Not even a little bit." But things got more complicated over the next few weeks. His girlfriend Ashley started making comments. At first they were subtle, little observations about how he was spending less time with their friend group. Then they got more direct. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said one afternoon as they walked to the parking lot. David had asked Jake to help him carry some books to his mom's car, and Ashley had been waiting, visibly annoyed. "Doing what? Helping someone? You know what I mean. You're with him every day now. Every lunch, after school sometimes. People are starting to think it's weird." Jake stopped walking. "People or you?" Ashley crossed her arms. "Don't make me the bad guy here. I'm just saying you've changed. You used to care about things. Now all you do is hang out with David and talk about airplanes. I still care about things, just maybe different things than before." "Well, I didn't sign up for this version of you," Ashley said, her voice sharp. "I started dating the popular football player, not the guy who ditches his friends to sit with the special ed kid." The words hung in the air between them like poison. Jake felt something shift in his chest, a clarity he hadn't expected. "Then maybe we shouldn't be dating anymore," he said quietly. Ashley's eyes widened. "Are you seriously choosing him over me?" I'm choosing to be someone I can respect, Jake replied. There's a difference. She stared at him for a long moment, then shook her head. Fine. Have fun with your new best friend. She walked away without looking back. Jake stood there for a minute, processing what had just happened. He dated Ashley for almost 2 years, but as he thought about it, he realized he didn't feel as sad as he probably should. He felt relieved. The next day at lunch, David noticed something was different. You seem quiet, he observed. Did something bad happen? Ashley and I broke up. David looked confused. Ashley was your girlfriend. I saw you together at the football game. You were holding hands. Yeah, well, not anymore. Why did you break up? Was it because of me? David's voice got higher, more stressed. Because you sit with me at lunch now? I can eat alone again if that fixes it. I'm used to eating alone. No, Jake said firmly. It's not your fault, David. Don't ever think that. She just didn't like that I was changing, but honestly, I like who I'm becoming better than who I was. David processed this for a moment. I like who you are too. You're my friend. I've never had a friend before. Not a real one. Something about the simple honesty of that statement hit Jake hard. He'd had dozens of friends over the years, people he'd hung out with, played sports with, gone to parties with. But how many of them were real? How many would stick around if he wasn't popular anymore? You're my friend too, Jake said, and meant it completely. As the weeks passed, their friendship deepened in unexpected ways. Jake learned about David's routines, the things that helped him feel safe in a world that often felt too loud, too bright, too unpredictable. He learned that David needed to know what was happening next, that surprises made him anxious, that certain textures of food made him physically uncomfortable. David, in turn, started teaching Jake about his interests. They spent an afternoon at David's house building model planes together. Jake's hands were too big and clumsy at first, but David was patient, showing him how to hold the tiny pieces, how to apply the glue in just the right amount. You're getting better, David said, inspecting Jake's work on a wing section. Last week you used too much glue. This is almost perfect. Jake's mom, who'd driven him to David's house, watched from the doorway with a soft smile. Later, as she drove Jake home, she said, I'm proud of you, honey. For what? For being kind. For seeing beyond what everyone else sees. She reached over and squeezed his hand. Your father and I raised you right. At school, Jake started noticing things he'd never paid attention to before. He saw other students eating alone, saw the way certain kids got ignored or mocked. He noticed how the special education classroom was tucked away in a corner of the building, as if hiding those students from everyone else. It bothered him in a way it never had before. One day he convinced David to come watch football practice. David was hesitant at first, worried about the noise and the crowd, but Jake promised they could leave anytime he felt overwhelmed. David sat in the bleachers with his noise-canceling headphones on, watching intently. After practice, as Jake jogged over, David said, You're very fast. You ran the 40-yard dash in 5.3 seconds. I timed it on my phone. Some of Jake's teammates had noticed David in the stands. Tyler, the same kid who'd bullied David in the cafeteria weeks ago, walked past and muttered something under his breath. Jake heard it and turned around fast. What did you just say? Tyler tried to play it off. Nothing, man. Just talking to myself. Say it again. To my face this time. The other players stopped what they were doing, sensing something was about to happen. Tyler looked around, realized he didn't have backup this time, and walked away without another word. Connor, who'd barely spoken to Jake in weeks, came over. You know you're going to get a reputation for this, right? Jake Morrison, defender of the weird kids. Good, Jake said. Maybe that's the reputation I want. David had watched the whole interaction from the bleachers. As they walked to the parking lot, he said, You stood up for me again. That's 3 times now. I've been counting. You don't need to count, David. That's what friends do. I wish I could stand up for you sometime, but I'm not big like you. And I don't always know the right thing to say when people are mean. Jake thought about this. You know what? You stand up for me in other ways. You're honest with me. You tell me when I'm wrong. You don't pretend to be someone you're not just to make me like you. That takes guts too. David smiled, one of his rare full smiles that made his eyes crinkle. I never thought about it that way. My mom says honesty is my superpower. Most people think it's a problem. It's definitely a superpower, Jake agreed. That weekend, Jake invited David to hang out outside of school for the first time. They went to an aerospace museum an hour away, David's favorite place in the world. Jake watched as David transformed, becoming animated and talkative in a way he never was at school. He explained every exhibit, every aircraft, every technical detail with the kind of passion that made strangers stop and listen. An older man, a veteran who'd flown in the Air Force, struck up a conversation with David about a fighter jet on display. They talked for 20 minutes, David rattling off specifications and the veteran nodding along, impressed. When they finished, the man said to Jake, "Your brother is incredibly knowledgeable. You must be proud of him." Jake didn't correct him about the brother part. "I am," he said simply. On the drive home, David was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Today was the best day I've had in years. Maybe ever, yeah?"
Why's that?
"Because I got to be myself and nobody made fun of me. And because you were there. Everything is better when you're there." Jake had to swallow hard to get past the lump in his throat. He'd scored winning touchdowns, had made the all-conference team, had been voted homecoming king the year before, but none of those achievements had made him feel the way David's words did right now. By October, their friendship had become a known thing at school. Some people respected it. Others mocked it quietly. A few teachers pulled Jake aside to tell him what he was doing mattered, that they wished more students would follow his example. But not everyone was happy about it. Tyler and his friends had backed off, but there were others, students who saw Jake's friendship with David as some kind of weakness to exploit. They created a group chat making fun of both of them, posting memes and edited photos. Jake heard about it from a kid in his English class who felt bad and showed him. The cruelty of it took Jake's breath away. They'd taken pictures of David from his social media, pictures David had posted innocently, pictures of his model planes and his cat, and a selfie he'd taken at the Aerospace Museum. And they'd turned all of it into jokes. Jake showed the screenshots to the principal the next day, demanding action. But Principal Dawson was hesitant, talking about free speech and the difficulty of punishing students for things done outside school on private devices. "They're bullying him," Jake said, his voice rising. "How is that free speech?" "I understand your frustration, Jake, but unless they're making direct threats, there's not much we can do administratively." Jake left the office furious. That night he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about David seeing those posts, about how hurt he would be. David trusted people so easily, took things so literally. He wouldn't understand why someone would want to hurt him for no reason. The next morning, an idea started forming in Jake's mind. If the administration wouldn't do anything, if the bullies could hide behind screens and group chats, then maybe he needed to do something bigger. Something that would force everyone to pay attention. At lunch, he sat down with David and said, "I want to do something to help. Not just you, but other kids who go through what you go through. Would you be okay with that?" David looked up from his carefully organized lunch. "What kind of something?" "I'm not totally sure yet. But I think I want to talk to people about what it's like to be your friend, about what I've learned, about how messed up it is that people treat you differently." David thought about this seriously. "Would you tell them about my airplanes?" "If you want me to." "Okay," David said. "You can do that, but only if you promise one thing." "What's that?" "That we'll still have lunch together. Even if you get popular again. Even if people stop being mean and everyone wants to be your friend. You'll still sit with me." Jake reached across the table and bumped David's fist gently, their version of a handshake. "Always, buddy." That's a promise. He didn't know it yet. But that conversation would set in motion a chain of events that would change not just their school, but eventually reach far beyond anything either of them could imagine. But for now, it was just two friends eating lunch together, planning to make the world a little bit better, one small step at a time. Jake spent the next week researching and planning. He talked to his mom, who worked in public relations, about the best way to get a message across. He reached out to Mrs. Patterson, David's aide, who connected him with other special education teachers. He read articles about autism and inclusion, watched videos made by people on the spectrum, and learned everything he could. The more he learned, the angrier he got. Not at David or people like him, but at how society was set up to exclude them, at how schools talked about inclusion but then separated kids into different classrooms, different lunch periods, different everything, at how the word special was used as an insult in the hallways every single day. He approached Principal Dawson again with a proposal. He wanted to organize an assembly about bullying and inclusion, something that would force the whole school to pay attention. At first, Dawson was reluctant. "Jake, I appreciate your passion, but assemblies need to be carefully planned. We can't just throw something together," the principal said from behind his desk. "Then let's plan it carefully," Jake countered. "But it needs to happen. Those screenshots I showed you last week? The bullying hasn't stopped. It's gotten worse. And if the school won't do anything about it officially, then at least let me try to change some minds." "What makes you think an assembly will change anything?" Jake leaned forward. "Maybe it won't change everyone, but if it changes even a few people, if it makes even a handful of students think twice before they post something cruel or knock someone's lunch tray over, isn't that worth an hour of class time?" Principal Dawson studied him for a long moment. "You've really thought about this?" "Every single day since I met David. Every time I see how people look at him, talk about him, avoid him." "Yeah, I've thought about it." The principal sighed. "Okay, but you'll need to work with the counseling department. And I want to see an outline of what you're planning to say. Nothing that will stir up more trouble." "Thank you," Jake said, standing up. Then as he reached the door, he turned back. "And sir, if you don't let me do this through the proper channels, I'll reach out to the local news stations myself. They love stories about bullying. This school doesn't need that kind of attention, does it?" It wasn't quite a threat, but it was close enough. Principal Dawson's expression hardened, but he nodded slowly. "Let's keep this internal. I'll talk to the counseling staff today." Over the next 2 weeks, Jake prepared his presentation with the help of Mrs. Patterson and the school counselor. He asked David if he'd be willing to speak too, but David was hesitant. "I don't like talking in front of lots of people," David said during lunch. "Too many faces. Too much noise. What if I say something wrong?" "You can't say anything wrong," Jake assured him. "You'd just be telling your story. Your truth. That's all. What if people laugh?" The question broke Jake's heart a little. "I'll be right there with you. And if anyone laughs, they'll have to deal with me." David thought about it for 3 whole days, which Jake learned was how David processed big decisions. He needed time to think through every possibility, every outcome, every detail. Finally, on a Thursday afternoon, David said, "Okay, I'll do it. But you have to promise to go first. And if I need to stop, you have to promise I can leave." "Deal," Jake said. The assembly was scheduled for a Friday morning, 2 weeks before Thanksgiving break. The entire school would be there, over 2,000 students packed into the gymnasium. Jake had barely slept the night before, his speech memorized, but his stomach full of knots. In the locker room before the assembly, Connor found him. They hadn't talked much since their argument weeks ago, hadn't really been friends the way they used to be. "Hey," Connor said awkwardly. "I heard about the assembly." "That's pretty cool." "Thanks," Jake replied, not sure what else to say. "Look, I've been thinking about what you said, about reputation and stuff." Connor shifted his weight from foot to foot. "I was wrong, okay? I should have had your back instead of worrying about what people thought." Jake felt the tension he'd been carrying around ease just a bit. "I appreciate that. David's lucky to have you as a friend. And honestly, after watching you these past couple months, I think you're lucky to have him too." Connor held out his hand. "Friends?" Jake shook it. Friends. The gymnasium was chaos when Jake and David walked in. Students filled the bleachers, talking and laughing, completely unaware of what was about to happen. David had his noise-canceling headphones on, though Jake had convinced him to take them off once he was on stage. Principal Dawson introduced them with a surprisingly heartfelt speech about the importance of kindness and community. Then it was Jake's turn. He walked to the microphone, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. 2,000 faces stared back at him. He found his mom in the parents section, who'd taken off work to be there. She gave him a thumbs up. "Hey everyone," Jake started, his voice echoing through the gym. "Most of you know me. I'm Jake Morrison. I play football. I'm a senior. But what you might not know is that a few months ago, I met someone who completely changed how I see the world." He gestured to David, who was sitting in a chair on the stage, looking down at his hands. "This is my friend David. He's a freshman. He's really into airplanes and he has autism. Some of you know him. Some of you have made fun of him, and all of you have probably seen him eating lunch alone at some point." The gymnasium had gotten quieter. People were actually listening. "I want to tell you a story," Jake continued. "It starts in the cafeteria about 3 months ago. I watched 3 students knock David's lunch tray over and laugh while he had a panic attack. And I stopped them. Not because I was trying to be a hero, but because it was the right thing to do. And then I sat down and had lunch with him. That's it. That's the whole story of how we became friends. He paused, looking out at the sea of faces. But here's the thing. That one lunch, it changed my life. See, I thought I knew what friendship was. I thought it was about hanging out with the popular kids, going to parties, having a girlfriend who looked good in pictures. But David taught me something different. He taught me that real friendship is about showing up. It's about accepting someone exactly as they are. It's about standing up for people even when it costs you something. Jake saw some students nodding. Others looked uncomfortable. Probably the ones who'd laughed at David in the hallways or shared those cruel posts. David processes the world differently than most of us. Loud noises hurt his ears. Unexpected changes stress him out. He doesn't always get sarcasm or jokes. But you know what? He's also the most genuine person I've ever met. He doesn't lie. He doesn't manipulate. He doesn't pretend to be someone he's not to impress anybody. How many of us can say that about ourselves? The gymnasium was completely silent now. Even the teachers had stopped whispering to each other. I've lost friends over this friendship, Jake said, his voice getting stronger. I've been called names. People have said I'm wasting my senior year. My girlfriend broke up with me because she didn't like that I was different now. And honestly, I don't care. Because being David's friend has taught me more about courage, loyalty, and what it means to be a good person than anything else in my entire life. He took a breath, preparing for the next part. But this isn't just about me and David. This is about all of us. This school has a problem. We have students who eat lunch alone every single day because nobody will sit with them. We have kids who get mocked in the hallways for being different. We have entire classrooms of students who are kept separate from the rest of us like they're somehow less than, and we all just accept it as normal. Some students were crying now. Jake could see a few teachers wiping their eyes. There's a social media group chat going around right now. Some of you are probably in it. It's full of memes and jokes making fun of David and other students with disabilities. I reported it to the administration, but there's not much they can do because it's happening outside of school, so I'm going to say this directly to whoever made it and whoever participates in it. Jake's voice hardened. You should be ashamed. You're not funny. You're not clever. You're bullies hiding behind screens because you're too coward to say these things to someone's face. The atmosphere in the gym shifted. Some students looked around nervously, probably wondering if others knew they were in that group chat. But I'm not here just to call people out, Jake continued. I'm here to challenge all of us to do better. Starting today. Starting now. If you see someone eating alone, sit with them. If you hear someone making fun of a kid with a disability, call them out. If you notice someone who needs help, help them. It's not complicated. It's just about choosing kindness over cruelty, inclusion over exclusion. He looked at David, who had taken off his headphones and was watching Jake with wide eyes. David, you want to come up here? David stood slowly, walking to the microphone with visible nervousness. His hands were shaking. Jake put a hand on his shoulder, steady and reassuring. Hi, David said, his voice quiet. Jake adjusted the microphone down to his height. My name is David Chen. I have autism. That means my brain works differently than most people's brains. Sometimes things that are easy for you are really hard for me, like making eye contact or understanding when someone is joking. But sometimes things that are hard for you are easy for me, like remembering facts or noticing patterns. His voice was getting stronger as he talked, the way it always did when he spoke about something he'd prepared for. Before I met Jake, I ate lunch alone every day. I've eaten lunch alone since kindergarten. I thought that was just how things were supposed to be for people like me. Nobody wanted to be my friend because I'm weird. I know I'm weird. People tell me all the time. Jake squeezed his shoulder gently, encouraging him to keep going. But Jake sat with me anyway, and he kept sitting with me, even when his friends stopped talking to him, even when his girlfriend broke up with him, even when people made fun of him for being nice to me. He didn't have to do any of that. But he did it anyway because Jake is a good person. David turned to look at Jake. You're my best friend. You're my only friend. And I want you to know that even if everyone in this whole school was mean to you, I would still be your friend. Because that's what friends do. They stay. There wasn't a dry eye in the gymnasium. Even some of the toughest guys on the football team were wiping their faces. I don't know if this assembly will change anything, David continued, turning back to the crowd. Jake says it might help some people understand. But even if it doesn't, even if people still make fun of me and still knock my lunch tray over, at least now you know something. You know that I'm a person with feelings. You know that words hurt me, even if I don't always show it the way you expect. And you know that somewhere out there, there's at least one person who thinks I'm worth being friends with. He stepped away from the microphone and went back to his chair, putting his headphones back on. The sensory overload of 2,000 people in one space was too much, but he'd done it. He'd said what he needed to say. Principal Dawson took the microphone. "Thank you, Jake and David. That was incredibly brave." He looked out at the students. "Now I want everyone to take a moment and think about what you just heard. Think about the choices you make every day. Think about the kind of person you want to be and the kind of school we want to have. Kindness isn't automatic. It's a choice we have to make over and over again. Let's choose better." As students filed out of the gym, the response was mixed. Some kids came up to Jake and David, thanking them, telling them they were inspired. Others avoided eye contact, guilty or angry, or both. Tyler, the original bully from the cafeteria, actually approached them near the door. "That took guts," he said to David, not quite meeting his eyes. "I'm sorry." "For what I did, all of it." David looked at him carefully. "Do you mean it? Or are you just saying it because everyone is watching?" The blunt question made Tyler flinch. "I mean it. I was a jerk. You didn't deserve that." "Okay," David said simply. "Apology accepted. But if you do it again, the apology won't count anymore." Tyler nodded and walked away. Jake watched him go, not entirely convinced, but willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. That afternoon, a local news crew showed up at the school. Someone's parent had seen the assembly and called them, thinking it was a story worth telling. The reporter interviewed Jake, David, and Principal Dawson. She asked thoughtful questions about bullying, inclusion, and what had motivated Jake to speak up. When the segment aired that evening, it got picked up by the station's website. Then it got shared on social media. Then it went viral. Within 48 hours, Jake and David's story was everywhere. Millions of views, thousands of comments, news outlets across the country reaching out for interviews. Jake's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. His Instagram gained 10,000 followers overnight. David's mom called crying, saying she'd received messages from parents of kids with autism all over the world, thanking them for sharing their story. But with the positive attention came negative attention too. There were cruel comments online, people saying Jake was just using David for attention, that the whole thing was staged, that David didn't even seem that autistic, so what was the big deal? Jake tried not to read them, but some of them got through. "People are saying mean things about us on the internet," David observed one day at lunch, scrolling through his phone. "Yeah," Jake said. "There are always going to be mean people. We can't control that, but we told the truth." Why would people be mad about the truth? Jake thought about how to explain it. Some people don't like being challenged. They don't like looking at themselves and realizing they might need to change. So instead of changing, they attack the people who are holding up the mirror. David considered this. That seems very inefficient. It would be easier to just be nice. Jake laughed, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "You're absolutely right. It would be much easier." What neither of them knew was that their story had reached someone who would change everything. A documentary filmmaker named Rebecca Walsh had seen the news segment and was already making calls, already imagining how this friendship could become something bigger, something that could reach even more people than a viral video ever could. But that conversation was still a few days away. For now, Jake and David were just two friends sitting in the cafeteria, eating lunch together, trying to process the fact that their small act of friendship had somehow touched millions of people. "Do you think we made a difference?" David asked. Jake looked around the cafeteria. He saw a girl from the special education program sitting with a group of students who'd never talked to her before. He saw Connor at another table waving at them with a genuine smile. He saw fewer students eating alone than he'd seen in months. "Yeah," Jake said. "I think we did." The email came to Jake's school account on a Tuesday morning. It was from someone named Rebecca Walsh, a documentary filmmaker based in California who'd seen their story online. She wanted to know if Jake and David would be interested in being part of a documentary about friendship, inclusion, and what it means to stand up for what's right. Jake read the email 3 times during English class, barely hearing anything his teacher said about Shakespeare. At lunch, he showed it to David, who read it slowly, his lips moving slightly as he processed each word. A documentary is a non-fiction film that documents reality, David said, which made Jake smile because of course David would define it. Would we be on camera? I think so. That's usually how documentaries work. David's face scrunched up in thought. I don't like having my picture taken usually. The flash is too bright and people always tell me to smile more naturally, but I don't know what that means. We don't have to do it if you don't want to, Jake said quickly. It's completely up to you. But you want to do it. It wasn't a question. David had gotten good at reading Jake, at understanding the tone of his voice even when the word said something different. I think it could help more people, Jake admitted, like how the assembly helped people at our school. But it's only worth doing if you're okay with it. David took a bite of his sandwich, chewing thoughtfully. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. 3 days later, David came to school with a list. It was written in his precise handwriting on a piece of notebook paper, folded neatly in his backpack. He pulled it out at lunch and spread it on the table. I made a list of pros and cons about the documentary, he announced. Pro number 1, it might help other kids with autism feel less alone. Pro number 2, it might teach people to be nicer. Pro number 3, we'd be doing it together, so I wouldn't have to be brave by myself. Jake felt his chest tighten with emotion but kept his expression neutral, letting David finish. Con number 1, cameras make me uncomfortable. Con number 2, people might say mean things about us. Con number 3, what if I mess up and say something wrong and everyone sees it? David looked up from his list. But then I thought about something you said at the assembly. You said that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do the thing anyway, even though you're scared. Yeah, I said that. So I think we should do it. The pros are more important than the cons, even if I'm scared. Jake reached across the table and bumped David's fist gently. You're the bravest person I know, you know that? I'm really not. I cry when the fire alarm goes off. I can't even watch scary movies. Bravery isn't about not being scared of things. It's about doing what's right even when it's hard, and you do that every single day just by being yourself in a world that doesn't always make it easy. David smiled, one of his real smiles that made his whole face light up. Okay, let's email her back and say yes. Rebecca flew out 2 weeks later to meet them in person. She was in her mid-30s with kind eyes and an energy that immediately put David at ease. She explained that she wanted to spend several months filming their daily lives, capturing the reality of their friendship and the impact it was having. I'm not interested in making you look like heroes or saints, she said over coffee with Jake, David, and their parents. I want to show the real stuff. The hard days, the frustrations, the moments when things don't work perfectly, because that's what people need to see. Real friendship isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. David's mom, Lisa, had been quiet for most of the meeting, but now she spoke up. What about David's privacy? He's still a minor. I need to know he'll be protected. Absolutely, Rebecca assured her. You'll have approval over everything. If there's anything David's uncomfortable with, we cut it. No questions asked. This is his story as much as Jake's, and he gets a say in how it's told. They agreed to start filming after Christmas break. Rebecca and a small crew would follow them for 6 months, documenting their friendship, their daily routines, and the ongoing changes at their school. The first day of filming was awkward. David kept looking at the camera, which made Rebecca laugh. Try to ignore it, she said. I know that's hard, but just pretend we're not here. But you are here, David pointed out logically. How can I pretend you're not when I can see you? Fair point, Rebecca conceded. Okay, how about this? Instead of ignoring us, just be yourself. Talk to Jake like you normally would. We're just observers. It took a few days, but eventually David got used to the camera. Rebecca was good at making herself invisible, at capturing moments without interfering. She filmed them at lunch, at Jake's football practice, at David's house working on model airplanes. She interviewed their friends, their teachers, their families. One of the most powerful scenes she captured happened about a month into filming. Jake and David were walking through the hallway when they saw a group of students surrounding a younger kid, a 7th grader who also had autism. The kid was getting agitated, his voice rising, and the other students were laughing. Jake didn't hesitate. He walked right up to the group. Hey, back off. Give him some space. The students scattered, recognizing Jake, but the younger kid was still upset, rocking back and forth, his hands covering his ears. David moved closer, crouching down to the kid's level but not touching him. Hey, David said softly. My name is David. I have autism too. I know everything feels like too much right now, but you're going to be okay. Just breathe with me, okay? In through your nose, out through your mouth. The kid looked at David and something in his expression shifted. He started breathing with David matching his rhythm. After a few minutes, his hands came down from his ears. That's good, David encouraged. You're doing great. Do you want me to walk with you somewhere quiet? The kid nodded and David led him to the library, talking quietly the whole way about breathing techniques and safe spaces and how it's okay to need a break sometimes. Jake followed behind and Rebecca's camera caught all of it. Later, when Rebecca interviewed David about that moment, he said something that ended up being one of the most memorable lines in the documentary. Jake taught me that someone standing up for you can change your life. So now I try to stand up for other people too, not with my fists because I'm not strong like that, but with my words and my understanding, because I know what it feels like to need someone. The documentary also captured harder moments. There was the day David had a meltdown in the cafeteria because they'd rearranged the tables and his usual spot was gone. Jake tried to help, but David was beyond reach, overwhelmed by the change and the sensory overload. The cameras caught Jake's frustration, his feeling of helplessness, his worry that he was making things worse. Later, in an interview, Jake was honest about that experience. People think being David's friend is just about being nice and sitting with him at lunch. But sometimes it's really hard. Sometimes I don't know what to do. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing him, and that's okay to admit, because real friendship isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up even when it's hard, even when you don't have all the answers. Rebecca also interviewed students who'd changed because of Jake and David's example. There was Christina, a senior who'd started a peer mentoring program pairing general education students with special needs students. There was Brandon, who'd been one of the kids in that original bullying group with Tyler, who now volunteered in the special education classroom. I was a jerk, Brandon said on camera, his voice heavy with regret. I didn't think about David as a real person with real feelings. He was just this target, you know? Something to make fun of, to get laughs. But watching Jake, seeing how he treated David with actual respect and friendship, it made me realize how messed up I was. I can't take back what I did, but I can try to do better now. The documentary captured David's growth too, his confidence building, his circle of friends slowly expanding. By spring, David wasn't eating lunch with just Jake anymore. There were usually 4 or 5 other students at their table, a mix of kids with and without disabilities, all drawn together by Jake and David's example. Rebecca filmed David giving a presentation to his history class about World War II aviation, something that would have been impossible for him at the start of the school year. Wait for next story.